In October 1974, a 21-year-old woman set out on a hitchhiking trip from California to Seattle. Her final known stop was in Oregon, a moment that would mark the beginning of a decades-long mystery. In 1976, a moss hunter made a grim discovery deep in the wooded areas of Linn County, Oregon. While exploring the forest, the individual came across a human skull, partially concealed among the moss and debris. Realizing the seriousness of what had been found, the moss hunter immediately notified the local law enforcement. The Linn County Sheriff's Office quickly responded to the call and accompanied the witness back to the remote location to begin a recovery operation. At the site, the investigators uncovered more skeletal remains scattered nearby, suggesting they had been there for a significant period of time. The condition of the bones and the environment indicated that the remains had been exposed to the elements for years. As the search expanded, the officers began to collect items found in close proximity to the bones, objects that could provide clues about the individual's identity and what may have happened to them. Among the recovered belongings were a clog-style shoe and a fraying-fringed leather coat, both showing signs of weathering. The investigators also found a leather belt decorated with Native American-style beadwork, 2 metal rings, and a pair of heavily degraded Levi's jeans. Each of these items was carefully cataloged and retained as evidence, offering potential links to the person whose remains had been discovered. The skeletal remains were soon transferred to the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office for a detailed forensic examination. A pathologist and an odontologist were assigned to the case, tasked with uncovering as much information as possible from the limited remains. The condition of the bones, however, made it difficult to determine a clear cause or manner of demise. The dental examination did provide one small lead. Several restorations were noted, suggesting the individual had received dental care during their lifetime. Unfortunately, at the time, the available records and technology offered little hope for matching those details to a missing person. For decades, the remains sat in evidence storage, their identity unknown, and their story untold. In 2010, after almost 4 decades without answers, the Oregon State Police submitted a bone sample from the unidentified remains to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification. This allowed a DNA profile to be entered into the National Missing Persons database, marking the first step towards solving a case that had remained silent. While the initial results did not produce an immediate match, it preserved vital genetic information that could one day be re-examined as technology advanced. A decade later, in 2020, the investigators decided to revisit the case. A new bone sample was processed, creating a more detailed genetic marker profile that offered stronger possibilities for comparison through modern forensic techniques. This renewed effort reflected the growing role of DNA analysis and genealogy in resolving long-standing cold cases. The results once again entered national databases, waiting for a connection that might finally reveal the identity of the unknown woman found in Linn County so many years before. That long-awaited breakthrough arrived in April 2023. A first cousin once removed of the unidentified woman uploaded their genetic profile to Family Tree DNA, an online database that allows law enforcement to compare genetic data from crime scenes or unidentified remains with public submissions. The match provided the investigators with a critical lead, narrowing the search to a specific family line. The discovery reignited the investigation with new hope after nearly half a century of uncertainty. To confirm the connection, the presumed younger sister, Valerie Nagel, agreed to provide her DNA for testing. In September 2025, the results confirmed what the investigators had long suspected. The remains found in 1976 belonged to Marion Vanetta McWhorter. Marion was born on January 7, 1953. She was the eldest of 5 siblings, a position that often came with both responsibility and affection. Her loved ones described her as thoughtful and adventurous, someone who sought to experience life beyond the familiar places she called home. In October 1974, when Marion was just 21 years old, she set out on a trip that was meant to be an exciting journey of exploration. She was hitchhiking her way from California to Seattle, driven by a desire to see more of the world and visit family along the way. Her ultimate plan was to travel to Alaska to see her aunt. During her travels, Marion stopped at a shopping mall in Tigard, Oregon, It was a typical day and an ordinary stop, the kind of place where people came and went without much thought. She had no way of knowing that danger was waiting ahead, hidden behind the normalcy of her surroundings. After 49 years of mystery, the name behind the unidentified remains was finally known. For Marion's family, the confirmation brought both heartbreak and relief, closing a chapter of not knowing while opening another filled with questions about how her life had ended. State forensic anthropologist specialists remarked that forensic genetic genealogy had been key in solving the case. It not only allowed investigators to identify a woman who likely did not go missing voluntarily, but also gave her family long overdue answers. Many of Marion's relatives had lived and passed without ever learning what happened to her, and this scientific breakthrough helped ease decades of uncertainty and pain. Even with her identity restored, the circumstances surrounding Marion's demise remain unresolved. The police learned that on the day she disappeared, a man driving a white pickup truck had offered her a ride, something Marion had mentioned to her aunt shortly before she vanished, a detail only revealed decades later by her sister. The authorities have not determined how she lost her life, and the Lynn County Sheriff's Office continues to investigate the case. For now, the mystery of what truly happened to Marion McWhorter lingers, but after nearly half a century, her story has finally been given a voice. Valerie, Marion's sister, says that the confirmation closes a decades-long search. She said, "I never forgot about her." In January 1989, Annapolis, Maryland police officers responded to a 911 call and discovered a chilling scene. Despite extensive investigations, the case went cold for decades, leaving the community without answers. On January 12, 1989, the Annapolis police officers responded to a 911 call on Kensington Way in Annapolis following reports of a possible crime. Upon arrival, they quickly identified the victim as Garnet Elizabeth Griffith, a local librarian. She was discovered deceased at the scene, and the shocking nature of her demise immediately set a somber tone for the investigation. The police officers began their work methodically, seeking to determine exactly what had happened to Garnet. The crime scene investigators carefully documented the area, collected evidence, and attempted to reconstruct the events leading up to her end. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner later determined that Garnet had suffered injuries consistent with a gunshot wound. This finding confirmed that her demise was the result of a violent act rather than an accident or natural causes. The discovery intensified the urgency of the investigation as the authorities sought to identify both the circumstances and the perpetrator behind the attack. The police officers began canvassing the neighborhood and speaking with residents, hoping to find any witnesses who might have seen or heard something that could provide crucial information about the case. Every lead was followed, and each tip was meticulously documented, reflecting the department's determination to bring clarity and justice. But despite their best efforts, leads were scarce, and the trail gradually grew cold as time passed. The breakthrough in Garnet Elizabeth Griffith's case came in 2008, almost 2 decades later, when a law enforcement database indicated a potential DNA match between material recovered from her body and that of William Cook Jr., who had recently been arrested for burglary. The detectives attempted to confront Cook 2 years later in a courthouse hallway, but he denied ever having intercourse with Garnet. He reportedly agreed to an interview at the police department, but failed to appear, disappearing from the investigators' immediate focus. In 2021, after another decade passed, the case received renewed attention after Annapolis Police Chief Ed Jackson established a cold case unit. The detectives ordered a direct comparison between Cook's DNA from the 2008 burglary and the genetic material recovered from Garnet decades earlier. The analysis confirmed the database's initial suggestion. The DNA matched, providing a critical breakthrough in a case that had remained unsolved for more than 30 years. On October 8, 2025, the authorities issued an arrest warrant for 52-year-old Cook in connection with Garnet's case. He was located and taken into custody the following day at his residence on West Washington Street in Annapolis, bringing a decades-long investigation to a pivotal moment. Cook had previously been confronted by law enforcement around the time of the crime when he was 17, as well as in 2010. The DNA match between his 2008 sample and the material recovered from Garnet, further supported by analysis of her fingernail clippings, confirmed that the genetic material was 8 times more likely to belong to Cook than to any unknown individual. This evidence solidified the forensic link necessary to move forward with charges. He now faces multiple serious charges, including first- and second-degree slaying, assault with intent to end someone's life, and first- and second-degree indecent assault. The authorities emphasized the significance of the case, noting that decades of investigation had finally yielded actionable evidence through the dedication of the Cold Case Unit. Annapolis Police Chief Edward Jackson credited the department's Cold Case Unit for the breakthrough, highlighting their commitment to solving long-standing cases. In a public statement, the police underscored that the arrest provided some measure of closure to Garnet's family and served as a reminder to the community that law enforcement remains steadfast in the pursuit of justice, regardless of how much time has passed. Chief Jackson said, "I cannot get into the motive, but I will tell you the evidence is linked to DNA." Cook is held without bail. In July 2005, a body was discovered beside a road in Deane, Spain. The local authorities quickly classified the demise as suspicious, but the identity of the victim remained unknown for nearly 2 decades. On July 3, 2005, the body of a woman was discovered beside a road in Deane, Spain. The scene immediately drew attention due to the unusual circumstances surrounding her demise. She was dressed in pink-colored clothing, including a pink floral top, fuchsia 3/4 length trousers, and black and pink sandals. Gold jewelry adorned her, hinting at a sense of personal style even in the tragedy of her final moments. The local authorities quickly classified the case as suspicious. From the outset, the police suspected that her demise was not the result of natural causes. The investigators noted signs that suggested the body may have been moved in the 12 hours leading up to its discovery, raising questions about the events that had led to her demise and the possibility of foul play. The initial phase of the investigation focused heavily on identifying the victim. The police knew that determining her identity was crucial to understanding what had happened and establishing a timeline of events. They canvassed the area, interviewed potential witnesses, and sought anyone who might have information that could shed light on the circumstances surrounding the case. Despite extensive efforts, the victim's identity remained elusive. Local leads produced no conclusive results, and the investigation grew increasingly challenging as years passed. The lack of identifying information left the investigators with limited avenues to pursue, and the case remained unresolved for an extended period. In 2023, after nearly 2 decades without success, the Spanish authorities escalated the investigation by submitting the case to Interpol's Identify Me campaign. This international effort aimed to use broader networks and modern forensic resources to finally uncover the victim's identity. A major breakthrough in the case came in 2025. The police in Turkey ran the fingerprints associated with the woman in pink through a national biometric database. This effort led to a significant match. The fingerprints belonged to Russian national Liudmila Zavada, who was 31 years old at the time of her demise. In September 2025, the identification was quickly confirmed through kinship DNA analysis. The investigators compared the DNA from the remains with that of one of Liudmila's close relatives, providing conclusive evidence that the woman who had remained unidentified for 20 years was indeed Liudmila Zavada. She was born in 1974 and hailed from Russia. With her identity established, the case took on a renewed urgency. The authorities could shift focus from identification to understanding the circumstances that led to her untimely demise. The confirmation of Liudmila's identity also offered a measure of closure to her family. After years of wondering about her fate, they had definitive knowledge of what had happened. While the circumstances of her demise remained deeply troubling, knowing her identity allowed loved ones to mourn properly and honor her memory rather than remaining in limbo. Interpol's Secretary General commented on the significance of the identification, emphasizing its broader impact. The statement read, "Each successful identification brings fresh hope to the families and friends of missing persons and creates new leads for investigators." In August 1992, workers stumbled upon the skeletonized remains of an unknown man near the St. John's Bridge in North Portland, Oregon. Despite exhaustive efforts, his identity and cause of demise remained a mystery for decades. On August 17, 1992, workers clearing brush in the vicinity of the St. John's Bridge in North Portland made a startling discovery. Hidden beneath layers of overgrowth were the skeletonized remains of a man. The workers, realizing the seriousness of what they had found, quickly alerted the authorities. The police officers arrived at the scene shortly after, and an investigation began immediately. What had started as a routine clearing job had turned into the beginning of a serious investigation. The Oregon State Police confirmed that the medical examiner's office collected the remains for further analysis. Forensic investigators began the meticulous process of examining the bones, searching for any details that could reveal who this man was and how he had lost his life. At that point, the investigators believed the remains belonged to a white male, approximately 50 years old. They estimated his height to be between 5 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 5 inches. The findings also indicated that the man had been deceased for about a year before being discovered. As the examination continued, several physical details began to emerge. The investigators noted signs of arthritic changes and multiple fractures throughout the skeleton. One of the most significant observations was a marked difference in the length of the man's legs, which suggested he would have walked with a limp during his lifetime. The fractures were more severe on the left side of the body, leading the investigators to theorize that he might have fallen from the bridge or possibly been struck by a vehicle and thrown from it. Despite these findings, both the cause and manner of demise remained undetermined. The man's clothing provided further clues, but no clear answers. Found among the remains were a maroon fleece-lined jacket, a pair of dark denim pants, and McGregor brand ankle boots. These items gave the investigators an idea of what the man had been wearing. The gloves still on his hands suggested that he had likely passed away during the colder months, possibly in winter. Each piece of clothing was carefully cataloged, yet none brought the investigators any closer to identifying who he was. Additional observations offered only fragments of his story. Brown hair was found near the remains, and a dental examination revealed that he had undergone restorative dental work at some point in his life. These details were recorded in hopes that one day they might be matched to missing person reports. Yet, despite these efforts, the clues remained too limited to draw any firm conclusions. In the end, the case reached a standstill and went cold. 19 years later, in 2011, a national missing and unidentified person system profile was created. The investigators uploaded the DNA results to the combined DNA index system in hopes of finding a match that could finally reveal the man's identity. However, despite their careful efforts, no matches were found. For years, the case sat dormant in the database, another unresolved entry among thousands of others, as technology at the time could take the investigation no further. By 2019, 8 years later, scientific advancements provided an opportunity to revisit the case. More extensive short tandem repeat, STR, DNA testing was conducted, and the results included the addition of YSTR, a male-specific DNA profile, as well as mitochondrial DNA profiles to CODIS. Yet again, the databases returned no matches. Even with these refined genetic markers, the identity of the man remained unknown. Each effort to uncover his name ended in the same silence that had surrounded the case for decades. A major turning point came after another 5 years went by, in February 2024, when the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office partnered with the DNA Doe Project, a non-profit organization that specializes in identifying unknown remains through investigative genetic genealogy. The group offered pro bono assistance and secured funding to perform advanced DNA extraction and sequencing. This collaboration reignited hope that, After so many years, the mystery of the man beneath the bridge might finally be solved. In March 2025, Astrea Forensics successfully produced a single nucleotide polymorphism profile from the remains. This detailed genetic profile was uploaded to the GED Match Pro database, revealing ancestry links to North Atlantic, Baltic, and Western Mediterranean heritage. With this information, volunteers from the DNA Doe Project began the painstaking process of investigative genetic genealogy. Every lead was examined through family trees, public archives, and newspaper records, slowly piecing together possible connections that could point to a name. By June, the SNP profile was also uploaded to the Family Tree DNA database to broaden the search. The team soon began to see potential matches that narrowed their focus to a small group of related individuals. Through months of careful research into family records and historical documents, volunteers identified a potential match and several possible relatives. In August, the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office reached out to the man believed to be the decedent's brother, who revealed that he had not been in contact with his siblings since the mid to late 1970s. He agreed to provide a DNA sample for comparison, a decision that would soon bring long-awaited answers. In October 2025, after 33 years of uncertainty, the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office confirmed that the remains belonged to Bryant Edward Deane, born August 2, 1952. Bryant's parents passed in 2017 and 2019 respectively, never knowing what happened to their son. His family left a space for him on their headstone. He can finally be laid to rest with his family. After years of searching, Bryant's story had come full circle, allowing both his name and his memory to find peace at last. In March 2013, a cleanup crew stumbled upon partial skeletal remains in Redding, California. For years, the identity of the woman remained a mystery. On March 11, 2013, a cleanup and brush cutting crew working near the ACID Canal in Redding made an unexpected discovery. Among blackberry bushes, they found partial skeletal remains. Local law enforcement, including the Redding Police Department and the Shasta County Coroner's Office, arrived and documented the scene. The remains were collected, but they were incomplete and had been exposed to weather conditions and scavenging animals for an extended period of time. Because of the level of decomposition and damage, the investigators were unable to determine a cause or manner of demise from the bones alone. Following the recovery, the investigators moved into the initial forensic steps required in unidentified remains cases. DNA was extracted and submitted for comparison through state and national systems, including CODIS and NAMUS. However, no matches were returned. There was also not enough ante-mortem information available to make identifications through dental records or medical device comparisons. With no direct leads, the remains became part of a growing backlog of cold cases that held fragments of a person's story, but no confirmed identity. A breakthrough came a decade later as forensic DNA technology progressed. In 2023, the Shasta County Coroner's Office partnered with specialized forensic genetics laboratories, including Othram, to re-examine the DNA. Using advanced genome sequencing and forensic genetic genealogy, analysts were able to extract and interpret degraded DNA that previously had been unusable. By comparing shared DNA segments through genealogical databases, the investigators were finally able to identify relatives. These new scientific methods made it possible to determine that the remains belonged to Velma Louise Silva Lee, solving a mystery that had remained unanswered for more than a decade. Using advanced DNA sequencing and genealogical research, the forensic laboratory Othram was able to create a viable genetic profile from the degraded remains. This profile led investigators to living relatives, which provided the first substantial lead in the case. In July 2023, the investigators contacted a younger half-sister and later reached Velma's son. A DNA swab collected from the son confirmed a familial match in September 2025, with Othram issuing a formal report on September 15th. Velma was born in 1936 and spent most of her life in the Bay Area. Recent reporting that confirmed her identity described her as a resident of Napa. For reasons that were not fully clear, Velma had been out of contact with her family for many years. Relatives recalled trying to locate her around 2003 and 2004, but no verifiable proof of her being alive ever surfaced during those efforts. At one point, the family even hired a private investigator, but with no results, the search eventually stopped. Without ongoing confirmation of her whereabouts, the family came to believe she had likely passed away, and no active missing person report continued through law enforcement databases. Once the identification was finalized, the Shasta County Coroner's Office began the administrative process to return Velma's remains to her family for burial. Even with the identity confirmed, the circumstances surrounding Velma's demise remained unclear. Public reports repeatedly emphasized that the degree of decomposition prevented any medical conclusions about how or when Velma lost her life. No public statements indicated the existence of suspects or arrests connected to the case. Thus, while the identification resolved the question of who the remains belonged to, it did not answer the deeper question of what happened to her.